Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode number 28 of the Pan Future Society podcast. I am your host, Sean, as always, and not as always, but only for today only, and never, never again. It is Saturday, December 3rd, 2016. Unless somebody out there has a time machine, then you can come back and have December 3rd, 2016 again and again. My opening bit for this week, I usually ramble about something off the top of my head, and this week I have to bring you something that is pretty depressing and sad for many reasons, and you might wonder why it's on a show about futurism and science. And a big part of what I want to do with this show is to somehow encourage discussion and education toward preserving civilization. I've used the word civilization several times, and in many ways it's being civilized or having a civilization to me means choosing to be better than you want to be, or choosing not to just give into your base emotions. It's something that is difficult to do, and that's why civilization is difficult to achieve and maintain. And it's something that I think is necessary, because without civilization, nothing else can happen. We had civilization before we had books and libraries and rocket ships and cars and smartphones. And the more we lose civilization, the more we lose all of the progress that we have made that wasn't directed by natural evolution. Basically, yeah, if we're not civilized, we're just animals. And I think it would be a failure of humanity to give in to being uncivilized. And certainly with the past election season the way it is and the way things are in the world right now, civilization seems to be taking a step backward. So what I wanted to talk about today, this bit of sad news, a girl named Brande Vela, 18 years old, killed herself in front of her family, committed suicide, because she had been bullied relentlessly by people at her school, by kids. Let's lay that out. That's the most disappointing part of this. She's a kid, got a whole life in front of her. Now, I've been down, I've been depressed, I've never been suicidal myself, but I understand why it gets that bad, why people feel that bad about it, and come to the conclusion that the only solution is to end their lives. But someone that young should never, ever have to feel like that. And things like this, and hearing stories about, after Trump's election, white students taunting minority students at school, or painting swastikas at schools, is disgusting. And it is the opposite of everything that civilization is supposed to be. I guess sort of one of my ongoing mantras on the show has been, be better tomorrow than you were today, be better today than you were yesterday. And of course, the news likes to latch on to bad news, because it pays the bills, I guess. So there's probably a lot of good news out there that we don't get. But for everybody out there, if you really are feeling like you're at the end of the rope, there is help. There are suicide prevention hotlines. There's help. I will talk to you. You can email me and I will talk to you. There is help, and if there's someone in your life who you are concerned about, say something and do something. Don't just let it slide. If your kid is being bullied, do something about it. If you are a bully, if you have kids who have been reported to have been bullies at school, do something about it, because this is for Brandy's family now to have to live with this tragedy is horrible. But I also have to wonder, the kids who bullied her, what do they feel right now? Do they feel, I hope they feel bad about it, but they need to be talked to. They need to figure this out too. They need to figure out why they did things like this and make some sort of amends, because they can't undo this now. And this is an issue it bothers me a lot, because 15 years ago, I wrote a song in honor of someone named Tempest Smith, who had killed herself. She was 12 years old. And her story, I just saw it on the news. And this happened shortly after the Columbine shooting in Colorado, where two teenagers had shot up the school and killed a bunch of people. And all the media coverage and everybody was talking about was, oh, what went wrong with these kids? What's wrong with kids today? How could they hurt other people like this? And it's an issue that has to be dealt with, but quietly in the background, there are so many kids out there who are bullied, are taunted, are teased, are pushed around, and they keep it to themselves, and they hide, and they think it's their fault, and it's not. And some of those kids get pushed too far, and they take their own lives, and that is a failure of humanity. That is a failure of what we can be. We're not going to make it 10,000 years into the future if we can't take care of issues like this. So take care of each other out there, and I guess that soapbox bit went on a little longer than I might have wanted it to. So on to the news of the moment.
It came from outer space.
And since everything ran a little long in that opening, one news item this week, and it is from space. An update on the BEAM project at the International Space Station. This BEAM stands for Bigelow Expandable Activity Module. It was launched to the station April of this year, and it is basically sort of a balloon attached to the side of the space station, which has been expanded and provides extra workspace or cargo space or whatnot in a space habitat. It's in the news now because it has they've recently released information on its performance data, all sorts of things about its temperature, it's the pressure inside the module, how it's holding up, if it's too hot, too cold, if it's insulated enough, and they're also collecting data about it's got sensors for radiation, how much protection it offers anyone who's inside of it, and also has data about things that it might run into, little bits of space dust or other small objects that it might collide with. There's a NASA website link that I'll put in the show notes, and it shows all sorts of other information about it, including a little animated GIF of it, GIF. I'm not going to get into that debate. A little animation of it opening. As it's to call it a balloon is a bit reductionist. It's certainly much more hardcore than a balloon. It's got like different panels and layers on it. Certainly something. It almost actually looks like spacesuit material in the picture here. So certainly they wouldn't put something up there that was too fragile. Obviously they're looking into this further, because this could provide easily expandable habitats on other space stations or deep space flights, something you could inflate and deflate as needed. And also, when it's deflated and all folded up, that obviously makes it much smaller and it is much easier to launch into space. So that is your news about the Beam Bigelow Expandable Activity Module on the International Space Station. It appears to be working out as planned. And that is your news of the moment. In the main segment this week, we continue on last week's theme of near-Earth objects. And this week, what we can do about them should we find one that is on a collision course. So what happens when we find a near-Earth object that will impact the planet? If we don't have enough warning, or even no warning at all, there's not much we can do. Tell people to take shelter, maybe get out of the way if we know where it will strike. Prepare emergency response to recovery and cleanup after the event. To what extent any of that would matter depends on the size of the object. However, if we have enough time, there are some things we can do with the technology we have right now to avoid the collision altogether. Technology right now, I say with a bit of an asterisk, things have not actually been built. But there's nothing in any of the things on the list I'm going to run down here today that we couldn't build. They're not, warp drive or any sort of technology that is something we don't know how to do at all yet. Of course, the whole point to having the detection and tracking programs and the database I mentioned on the last show is to find these objects, track them, and figure out how likely they are to intersect with us and possibly when that might happen. And as I mentioned last week as well, the solution is not a Bruce Willis Armageddon movie explosion. I'm not even going to describe why that movie is ridiculous, but in general, blowing up a large asteroid, even if you could, will just make a bunch of smaller asteroids that will still hit you. Breaking up a 5-kilometer wide rock into 3 to 5 chunks just makes the damage more widespread. Perhaps a much smaller asteroid could be broken up if most pieces would then burn up in the atmosphere. There are, however, many proposed ideas out there that are feasible. As I mentioned, none of these has been tested directly, and some are meant only to work on objects of a certain size, and it's likely that we will need several options going forward. One way an object could be prevented from impact is by deflection. Depending on the size of the object, we would need a year to perhaps decades of warning. The equation 3.5/t times 10 to the negative second meters per second to the negative first. I'm not sure how to read this equation exactly. That is my math educational failing. But in that equation, t is the number of years until a potential impact. That shows that it would take a relatively small change to deflect an object. Some potential methods for deflection include nuclear or other explosions. Nuclear is probably the only thing large enough. Not something huge that would break up the object, but an explosion that would provide just enough force to nudge the object out of its collision course. It has also been suggested that explosions near an object not directly on would generate heat, ablate the surface of the near-Earth object, and cause outgassing, which would push the object out of its current path. Some asteroids are actually loosely bound piles of rubble and might not be affected by direct explosion, but a series of heat-generating blasts might work. An idea has also been suggested that some sort of impactor be crashed into an asteroid, and the resulting crater could be used as sort of a rocket nozzle for subsequent nuclear explosions, helping to channel the force in one direction. The trick with a lot of these objects, one thing that makes it more complicated than it already is that they are spinning. So you have to deal with that. So figuring out when and where to hit them is an essential part of the equation as well. It could also be possible to change the orbit of an object through impact alone. This method would work best for objects that are solid bodies. It's essentially like shooting an asteroid with a bullet. If the asteroid is still very far away and we have a long warning time, even a very small change in path would be enough. The Deep Impact mission to Comet Tempel 1 smashed a piece of itself into the comet in 2005. The impactor had a mass of 370 kilograms and was traveling about 10 kilometers per second. Upon impact, it delivered a force equivalent to about 4.8 tons of TNT. Tempel 1 is about 8 kilometers by 5 kilometers in size, and the small impact ultimately shifted its orbit only by a tiny amount. However, given enough lead time, a tiny amount over hundreds of millions of kilometers could be enough to avoid impact. And I'm sure if this method were used, a larger impactor or several at once could be deployed. 370 kilograms is less than a quarter of the weight of a modern Volkswagen Beetle. The European Union has a project called NeoShield, and NeoShield 2 mission is currently studying the impactor method for deflection as a primary method of doing things. Another option is the use of a gravity tug or gravity tractor. Any two objects in near enough proximity for their given mass will affect each other gravitationally. So even a small space probe parked near an asteroid, given enough time and engines for course correction, will pull the asteroid into a different orbit. This method could have an advantage over others in that it could still work regardless of the spin of the object or if it is a rubble pile. One disadvantage I have read in researching this is that this method at the moment appears to be the most expensive option and requires a lot of time. Not really sure why it would be more expensive than a bunch of nuclear bombs, but hey. However, this technology could also be used to bring an asteroid into a stable orbit for mining opportunities. I don't know how easily that could be done with other deflection methods. Several other proposed methods include mass drivers. Those are electromagnetic slingshots, perhaps built on the moon, basically a gun, another way of doing the impactor method of deflection. Solar sails to tug the object. Rocket engines to push the object, lasers to ablate the surface of the object for outgassing or even to totally break it up into small, non-threatening pieces. Other methods I read about are variations on the above, all taking different amounts of time and energy to either divert or slow down the threat. There are some concerns over the technology that might be used to deflect an asteroid or comet. Carl Sagan and Rusty Schweickart have both pointed out that if you can deflect an object out of its current path, you can also alter the orbit of an object to target the planet on purpose, or perhaps even target a specific place on Earth. This is why it's so important for us to have international cooperation and governance over these possible plans, and it is also imperative that we educate the public to understand that the risk is to the entire planet. It's time we saw ourselves as all humans, and in the case of threats from space, we need to discard the notions of race, religion, or nationality. As mentioned before, large strikes have occurred in the past, and though rare, they will happen again. And if we are to expand our reach to Mars, back to the moon, and beyond, this technology will be useful wherever we go. Given the difficulty in diverting a large asteroid, it is imperative that we engage in long-term thinking and prepare solutions for a problem that, once detected, may take many years to avert. All right, that is your show for the week. Thank you, everyone, for joining me again on this episode and this continuing series. Next week, we're going to continue with some more threats from space because basically the universe is trying to kill you. At any rate, be good to each other. When I say things like that, I'm not trying to be like some sort of fluffy new age guy. I genuinely believe that it is a choice to be civilized. And as I spoke earlier about what I think civilization means and means to our future existence. So anyway, check us out on the web, panfuture.org. Email me at sean@panfuture.org for any reason. Get in touch, say hello, write a review on iTunes or Stitcher. That always helps the show. Do all the things with the things that you can do things with. And I will talk to you again in the future.